Near Perrier, Normandy, 21st July 1944, men of the 331st Infantry Regiment, 83rd Infantry Division, sprint across a bocage lane as bullets snap the hedgerows shut behind them. These sunken roads and earthen banks made every field a fortress. Days later, the Saint-Lô-Perrier sector became the launch pad for Operation Cobra and the American breakout. Over Tokyo Bay on the 2nd of September 1945, Corsairs and Hellcats sweep in formation as the surrender ceremony unfolds below. USS Missouri sits at left, the stage where Japan signed the instrument of surrender, while the fleet watches from the gray water. Other aircraft types in the flyover included TBM Avengers and SB-2C Helldivers. Nicknamed the Sonnengewehr, this sun gun was less laser and more science fiction. An orbiting concave mirror meant to focus sunlight into a scorching spot on Earth. The idea traces back to rocket visionary Hermann Oberth's 1929 space station concepts, later sensationalized by Allied intelligence reports in 1945. It never left the drawing board. Bat bombs were real. Under Project X-Ray, hibernating Mexican free-tailed bats were fitted with tiny timed incendiaries and meant to roost in wooden buildings before igniting. In a 1943 test, warmed bats escaped early and accidentally set parts of a New Mexico airfield on fire. The idea was shelved before combat use. Built by Krupp as a siege weapon for cracking France's Maginot Line, the 80-centimeter Schwerer Gustav was a 1,350-ton railway gun that hurled shells up to 7 tons, nearly 47 kilometers. It took thousands to lay track and protect it. In 1942, it finally roared at Sevastopol, blasting an underground ammo depot. Meet Rupert, the fake paratrooper built to start a real panic. Dropped by the RAF on the night of the 5th to the 6th of June 1944 in Operation Titanic, this burlap decoy carried timed explosives and a pintail noisemaker to mimic rifle fire. Its job was simple: pull German troops away from the real D-Day landings. On HMS King George V in 1941, sailors lugged 7-inch unrotated projectile rockets, an early Royal Navy answer to dive bombers. Fired in salvos, each rocket burst around 1,000 feet and dropped a parachute mine, trailing hundreds of feet of wire, hoping an aircraft would snag it. Unreliable and risky, the system was removed in 1941. Railed up a hillside like a steel spine, the V3 Hochdruckpumpe was a 130-meter multi-charge supergun. Side chambers were meant to ignite in sequence, boosting a 150mm shell out to roughly 165 kilometers, aiming at London from Mimoyekes. Allied bombing crippled the site, while shorter guns later shelled Luxembourg from 1944 to 1945. Meet the German Goliath, a mini-tracked demolition vehicle built to deliver explosives without exposing a squad. It was wire-guided. The operator drove it through a control cable up to about 650 meters long, then detonated a 60-kilogram charge against fortifications or vehicles. Futuristic on paper, but fragile in action. Looks like a harmless balloon, but this is Japan's Fugo weapon. From November 1944 to April 1945, about 9,000 hydrogen balloons made of mulberry bark paper rode the jet stream to North America, carrying incendiaries and a small high-explosive charge. Most missed, but one killed 6 civilians in Oregon in May 1945. Brewster's F-2A Buffalo looks sleek here, one of the U.S. Navy's first monoplane fighters. First flown in 1937 and entering service in 1939. It even won the Navy contract. Over the early 4F Wildcat. War moved faster than it did, and later, heavier variants struggled in frontline combat. The Panzerkampfwagen 8 Maus, seen here at the Kubinka Tank Museum, was Nazi Germany's attempt at the ultimate super-heavy tank. Designed by Ferdinand Porsche, it weighed 188 tons and was armed with a massive 128mm gun. Only 2 prototypes were built before the project was abandoned in 1944 as the war turned against Germany. Project Habakkuk began with a wild idea, building a massive aircraft carrier out of ice. British inventor Geoffrey Pike believed frozen water mixed with wood pulp, called peakrete, could withstand torpedoes. Tests in 1943 proved it worked, but the logistics were impossible. The plan was scrapped, though the experiment remains one of World War II's strangest innovations. 2 Douglas SBD-5. Dauntless dive bombers slip through thick cloud, each hauling a 1,000-pound bomb toward Japanese targets on Wake Island. The raid on 5–6 October 1943 launched from USS Yorktown CV-10, and the dramatic in-flight photo was taken by Lieutenant Charles Curlee from Edward Steichen's Navy Photo Unit. An LVT Alligator grinds onto Morotais surfline as assault troops jump into the sand, 15th of September 1944. The landing, codenamed Tradewind, seized the island as a fast-built airbase for the push toward the Philippines. LVTS made this possible, crawling from sea to jungle, and the LVT-4 became the most produced type. November 1940, during the Blitz, a YMCA mobile canteen pulls up beside an anti-aircraft gun sight, serving tea and snacks under the glare of searchlights and muzzle flash. These rolling kitchens were more than comfort. They kept crews warm and alert through long night alerts, while London and other cities took the hits. Silk blossoms across southern France as C-47s of the 12th Air Force troop carriers drop Allied troops and supplies between Nice and Marseille for Operation Dragoon. Before the seaborne landings hit the beaches, the 1st Airborne Task Force jumped near Le Moy to seize key roads and bridges, boxing in German defenders from the rear. Floating on the newly exploited jet stream, Japan's Fugo balloon bombs drifted 5,000 miles toward North America. Made from mulberry paper and guided by barometers that dumped sandbags to hold altitude, more than 9,000 were launched, but only about 300 reached land. After B-29s wrecked key hydrogen plants, Japan quit. One device killed 6 in Oregon. In 1944, designer George Hyde sketched a would-be assault carbine that looked like a Thompson's futuristic cousin. Chambered in .30 carbine and built from stamped steel, it even featured a quick-change barrel inspired by the MG-42. Only prototypes were made, and no confirmed surviving examples are known today. These British Covenanter cruiser tanks never lived up to their promise. Designed in 1939 to be fast and lightly armored, serious cooling problems and underpowered engines made them unreliable in hot weather. By the time enough were built, doctrine had outpaced them, so most ended up in home defense and training units instead of the front line. Built by the old gang of WWII tank pioneers, the TOG-2 was an 80-ton throwback designed in 1939 for a trench war Britain never got. Completed in 1941, it crawled at about 8.5 miles per hour and kept swapping turrets before the idea was dropped in 1944. One survives at Bovington. Nicknamed White Rabbit and Nellie, this bizarre trench-digging machine was Winston Churchill's 1939 attempt to revive a World War I idea. Built by the Royal Navy as Cultivator No. 6, it was meant to carve trenches through enemy lines. The 77-ton monster worked in tests, but by the time it was ready, trench warfare had become obsolete. Gray and towering, Japan's battleship Yamato cuts through the sea like a floating fortress. At nearly 72,000 tons fully loaded, she carried 9 46-centimeter guns, the largest ever mounted on a warship. Built in secrecy, Yamato's last sortie toward Okinawa ended on 7 April 1945 under massed carrier air attacks. This Soviet TB-3 did not fly alone. In the Zveno-Link experiments, it carried Polikarpov, Osko-16 parasite fighters under its wings, then released them near the target with bombs already mounted. The combo even struck Romania's Constanța oil depot in July 1941, and the fighters flew home under their own power. Sleek on paper, troubled in war, the Breda 88, Linz entered service with big hype. Its prototype even set world speed records in 1937, but once guns, bombs, and gear were added, performance collapsed. It flew brief raids in 1940. Then many airframes ended up parked as decoys on Italian airfields. Me-264V1, coded RE plus EN, lifts into the clouds in 1943. A glimpse of the Luftwaffe's never-realized heavy bomber dream, sparked by Chief of Staff Walter Weaver's 1930s push for long-range striking power. The 4-engine America bomber first flew on 23 December 1942. Only prototypes were followed before cancellation in 1944. Those craters are the signature of a weapon that barely fired in anger. The V3 Hochdruck pumper was meant to lob 150mm shells from the tunnels at Mimoyekes into London, using side charges along a barrel over 100 meters long. RAF Tallboy raids shattered the site before it could become a city killer. Prototype Me-163B Comet VD plus ER sits like a parked firework, but in the air, it was brutal. Introduced late 1944, this rocket interceptor could climb to bomber height in about 3 minutes, then had only a few minutes of powered flight before gliding home on a skid. Its volatile T-Stoff and C-Stoff fuels made accidents frighteningly common. Schwerer Gustav looks less like a gun and more like a rolling factory. Revived after Hitler asked Krupp in 1936 for a weapon to crack the Maginot Line, the 80-centimeter monster weighed about 1,350 tons and could hurl a 7-ton shell. At Sevastopol in 1942, it fired just 48 rounds before logistics beat ambition. Technicians swarm of V2 on its launch gear, a weapon built to strike from the edge of space. The missile carried about a 1-ton warhead, then arced up to roughly 80 kilometers on typical shots, sometimes far higher, before dropping supersonic with almost no warning. Brilliant engineering, brutally expensive, and wildly impractical. Ground crew ready. Defiant L-7006 of No. 264 Squadron, a fighter that bet everything on a rotating turret. Entering service in December 1939, it carried 4.303 Browning guns behind the pilot, and no forward guns. Early on, enemy pilots sometimes mistook it for a Hurricane, then learned to attack head-on, and the Defiant's flaws showed fast. At Hillesleben, in May 1945, the wind canoned looked like artillery from a sci-fi sketchbook. Instead of shells, it ignited hydrogen and oxygen to blast a high-velocity slug of compressed air through a curved barrel, hoping to flip low-flying aircraft. Tests could splinter boards, but real targets stayed safe, and the LB Bridge trial failed. A Yokosuka MXY-7, Oka Model 11 sits in a hangar like a tiny plane with a terrifying job. Slung under a G-4M Betty bomber, it was released close to Allied ships. Then its pilot lit 3 rockets for a screaming final dive. The name means cherry blossom, but the Allies nicknamed it Baka. A wall of smoke swallows USS Bunker Hill as sailors race across the flight deck on the 11th of May, 1945. Off Kyushu, 2 Mitsubishi A6M0 Kamikazes hit within about 30 seconds, each dropping a 550-pound bomb before crashing into parked, fueled aircraft. The official photo caption lists 372 dead and 264 wounded. Rows of clear plexiglass. Nose cones gleam under factory lights at Douglas Aircraft's Long Beach plant, October 1942. Trained women polish and fit the Bombardier greenhouse for a 20 Havoc attack bombers, known to the RAF as the Boston. Built for low-level strafing, night fighting, and reconnaissance, these noses were where missions began. Off New Guinea, a PT boat gunner grips twin .50 caliber Brownings and scans the water for a split-second target. The M2, nicknamed Ma Deuce, could spit about 450 to 600 rounds a minute with an effective range of around 1,830 meters. On PT boats, this close-range firepower mattered almost as much as torpedoes. In the control room, the periscope was the submarine's eye. World War II boats often carried a larger search scope and a slimmer attack scope that was harder to spot at the surface. The U.S. Navy's Type II daylight attack periscope entered fleet use in 1942, letting officers take quick, tense peeks before diving deep again. Off New Guinea, a PT boat skims the sea at around 40 knots, built for quick night strikes and quick escapes. Many were 80-foot Elco craft, carrying 21-inch torpedoes and heavy .50 caliber guns. Crews hunted Japanese barges and coastal targets, sometimes laying smoke to vanish after a hit. USS Pennsylvania slices into Lingayen Gulf in January 1945, followed by USS Colorado and the cruisers Louisville, Portland, and Columbia. This battle line was moving into the Philippines shore positions ahead of the Luzon landings. The approach was dangerous, with kamikaze attacks hitting the invasion force as it closed on the beaches. Smoke towers over USS Bunker Hill after 2 kamikaze hits in about 30 seconds off Kyushu on the 11th of May, 1945. The attackers came in low, each dropping a bomb before crashing onto a flight deck, crowded with fueled aircraft. The official Navy caption lists 372 dead and 264 wounded, yet the carrier stayed afloat. Through the periscope crosshairs, the Japanese destroyer Kamikaze heels over, her wake boiling as torpedoes finish the job. USS Nautilus photographed the sinking on 25 June 1942 off Japan, roughly 75 miles from Yokohama. In grainy black and white, a split-second victory becomes a watery disappearance. Aboard USS Iowa, a 16-inch Mark 7 gun erupts in a Pacific drill, hurling a 2,700-pound armor-piercing shell with a muzzle blast that looks like a storm cloud. These guns could fire about 2 rounds a minute and reach roughly 24 miles, turning a battleship into moving artillery for sea fights and shore bombardment. Off Kwajalein Atoll on the 4th of December, 1943, a Japanese Nakajima B-6N Tenzen torpedo bomber erupts in mid-air after a direct hit from a 5-inch gun aboard USS Yorktown. Photographer Alfred N. Cooperman froze the split second when an attack run becomes a falling fireball. Flak bursts dot the sky as a Japanese attacker turns into a streak of fire, captured from the escort carrier USS Kitgun Bay near the Mariana Islands in June 1944.